Let's be honest for a second. When people talk about power in the music industry, there are only a few names that always come up, and one of those names has always been Diddy. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs was the guy who seemed to control everything: music, fashion, parties, brands, connections. If something big was happening in hip-hop, chances were Diddy was somewhere in the middle of it, and for a long time, it looked like nothing could ever touch him. But here's the thing about power. When someone stays on top for that long, eventually people start asking questions. And recently, those questions have been getting louder. If you've been paying attention to the news lately, you've probably noticed that the conversation around Diddy has completely changed. The same man who spent decades building one of the most powerful brands in hip-hop is now facing a wave of lawsuits, investigations, and accusations that are putting his entire legacy under a microscope. And the deeper people start digging into the story, the more complicated it becomes. But to understand why this situation is so serious, you have to understand how big Diddy's empire actually was. We're not just talking about a rapper. We're talking about a business machine, a brand builder, a guy who took hip-hop culture and turned it into one of the most profitable industries in entertainment. Back in the early 90s, Diddy helped launch Bad Boy Records, and almost overnight, that label started producing some of the most iconic music of the decade. Artists like the Notorious B.I.G. weren't just successful, they became legends. And Diddy wasn't just behind the scenes making business deals. He was shaping the entire image of hip-hop during that era. The music videos were bigger, the lifestyle was louder, luxury became part of the brand. But here's what made Diddy different from most music executives. He understood something a lot of artists didn't at the time. Music was only the beginning. If you wanted to stay powerful in entertainment, you had to expand into everything else: fashion, alcohol brands, television, media, and that's exactly what he did. Over the next 2 decades, Diddy built a business empire that stretched far beyond music. The Sean John clothing brand exploded in popularity. His partnership with Kairock Vodka turned a liquor brand into a nightlife symbol. He invested in television networks, media companies, and entertainment ventures that kept his influence growing year after year. And if you looked at the outside of that empire, it seemed almost untouchable. Private jets, mansion parties, billionaire status headlines. For a long time, Diddy represented the ultimate success story. The guy who proved that hip-hop wasn't just music, it was a global business. But here's where the story starts getting uncomfortable. Because for years, rumors about Diddy's behavior behind the scenes had been circulating in the industry. Stories about the infamous parties, stories about control, stories about the way power worked inside his circle. Most of those stories never became mainstream headlines. They stayed in the background. People whispered about them, but nothing ever seemed to stick. Until recently. Over the past few years, multiple lawsuits and allegations began surfacing that placed Diddy at the center of serious controversy. Former associates, collaborators, and people connected to his world started coming forward with claims that painted a very different picture of the music mogul everyone thought they knew. And suddenly, the narrative changed. Instead of celebrating his empire, the headlines started asking difficult questions. What really happened behind those closed doors? What kind of environment existed around the events and parties connected to Diddy's brand? And why are so many people now speaking out at the same time? The legal battles surrounding Diddy quickly became one of the biggest stories in entertainment news. Lawsuits were filed, investigations were launched, and social media exploded with speculation about what might happen next. If you've spent any time online recently, you've probably seen the discussions. Some fans are defending him, saying people are jumping to conclusions before the full story comes out. Others believe the music industry has protected powerful figures for far too long, and that situations like this were inevitable. But regardless of which side people are on, one thing is clear: the Diddy conversation has completely shifted. For decades, his name represented success. Now, it represents controversy. And when someone at that level of influence starts facing public scrutiny, the impact spreads far beyond their personal reputation. Brands start paying attention, business partners start asking questions, and the empire that once looked untouchable suddenly starts looking much more fragile. You have to remember something about celebrity power. It's not just built on money, it's built on perception. As long as the public sees someone as successful, powerful, and untouchable, the brand keeps growing. But once that perception starts changing, everything can shift very quickly. We've seen this happen before with major figures in entertainment. One moment they're everywhere. The next moment, their entire legacy is being debated across the internet. And right now, that's exactly what's happening with Diddy. Some people believe this situation will eventually fade, and that he'll continue running his businesses like nothing happened. Others think we're watching the beginning of one of the biggest celebrity downfalls the music industry has ever seen. The truth is, no one knows exactly how this story ends. But what makes the Diddy situation so fascinating is how quickly the conversation around him changed. For decades, he represented power. Now people are questioning what that power was built on. And in the age of social media, once those questions start spreading, they rarely disappear. Because the internet doesn't forget. It keeps digging, it keeps analyzing, and it keeps asking the same question over and over again. What really happened behind the scenes of one of hip-hop's most powerful empires? Whether Diddy's legacy ultimately survives this moment, or whether his empire continues to crumble, is something only time will answer. But one thing is certain, the story of Sean Diddy Combs is no longer just about success. It's about what happens when decades of power suddenly collide with public scrutiny. And when that happens, even the most untouchable empires can start to fall apart.